Hello, my name is Jason Williams. I'm one of the coordinators for the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory Step Up Coordination Center, and I'd wanted to welcome you to this video. This is an orientation, so to speak, a virtual one, since we know we won't get all of you in the room. Our mentors are all over the country, and this is just a way for us to put faces and names, but then also give you a little bit more insight into the program, the expectations, and most importantly in this video, give you a chance to think about some evidence-based tips for having a great mentoring experience. So let me start with a little bit of an overview, get to some tips, and make sure that you know how to get in contact with us so that we continue providing support to make sure that you and the students have a really great experience over the next coming weeks. So, as you may know, Step Up supports high school students and groups that have been historically excluded. And that's really a wide variety, perhaps even wider than you might have thought, of students. The students come from very different backgrounds. And very often, part of that means that they don't have much familiarity or role models in an academic setting, in an academic context. So, understanding where the students are coming from is going to definitely give us an opportunity to make the mentoring experience a positive one. Students are going to get a chance to work with their mentors, with you, on a research project that's going to be presented at the end of summer symposium. Now, let me stop right there to say that we know 8 weeks is not a lot of time. For some, you have even a little bit less. And so there's not the expectation that the project is necessarily fully executed, but rather that there are various levels of completion that the project will reach. Nevertheless, with a great mentor and a attentive student, the program can be very, very rewarding, even if you don't quite meet every single one of the objectives for the research project that you have in mind. Then, during the school year, we as a coordinating center continue to work with the students, providing them mentorship and preparing them for college and future research. And you can learn more about the Step Up program and its history on the website from NIH. There are currently 5 coordinating centers, which really take care of students from as far east as, I guess, Maine and Puerto Rico to as far west as Guam and Marshall Islands. So it really covers the country quite extensively. Cold Spring Harbor largely covers the Northeast, a bit of the Midwest, Wake Forest in the South. Utah is just coming online and covers some of the mountain states, and the West Coast is covered by UCLA. And then Hawaii takes care of the students across the Pacific. The role that we provide as a coordinating center is that we're the ones that do the initial review of student applications, and then that's a competitive process. We make introductions to help you and the student find each other and determine that a mentoring relationship is possible. And we'll provide guidance and check-in. So on a weekly basis, we'll check in with the students, and then every couple of weeks, we'll be checking on with the mentors to make sure that you have everything you need. We also provide a stipend for the students, and we'll also be reaching out to you to complete some paperwork so that we can get your stipend starting to process as well. Who do you reach out to for help? I want to emphasize this at the beginning. So generally, we at the coordinating center will be your first ones to reach out with questions, but you can also contact the program directly at NIH at the email address that's on your screen. And then obviously for emergencies, you should follow the institutional policies. And we always recommend, and it's a procedure at most institutions, that there's emergency contact information for the student's family. And then we also would like to be contacted, and we have some of that information as well. There is an email address that you likely have been in touch with. So NIH Step Up at CSHL.edu. And that goes both to myself and Brittany, who is the other colleague who is assisting me. And you can also reach us directly at those email addresses. And we'd be more than happy to answer questions along the way and stay in touch with anything that we can do to support you to make sure that the mentoring experience is a good one. Here are some deadlines. Some of them are flexible, except for the symposium. So around this week, most of you will be starting the research experience, although some may need a little bit longer due to scheduling or paperwork. And about a month from now, we are going to be asking for abstracts. I'll emphasize that The abstract is, in some sense, not a traditional one. Usually we think about an abstract as being one of the final steps to summarize completed research. But within a month, we don't expect that. So we do expect that the abstract really conveys what the purpose and question is, that is the topic of research. And maybe it contains some preliminary results, but much more likely, it's just a general description of the intended research experience. Then towards actually the end of July, the students will be responsible for some presentations. And so we'll be reaching out with deadlines. Those may change a little bit, but we'll keep everyone in the loop, you as the mentor and as a student. We do assume that mentors will work with the student to review a product before they turn it in. Then in August, students will be traveling with us. We'll take care of all those arrangements to Bethesda for a symposium. The symposium is actually the Monday and Tuesday of that week, with students again arriving on Sunday. And then there's also a tour of the Capitol area, banquet, etc., as the students then are dismissed later in the week. Okay, so here is the bulk of my presentation. And again, whether you are a new mentor or an experienced mentor, I hope there's at least something that you can take away as being valuable to guiding you on the path to a successful journey this summer. So this is based upon mentor training that we deliver here at Cold Spring Harbor for our PIs and for those who are working with students, high school students, undergraduates, etc. And we do think about mentorship as really one of the most important things and responsibilities and opportunities that an investigator can have. And we also think about it broadly as really dealing with the students where they're at, encouraging them, supporting them, not necessarily creating clones of ourselves, but really helping a student to know that there are high expectations, but that they can meet them, and then that there's various ways to reach a successful outcome. Some of this is also based upon, and I encourage you to seek this out as one of your resources, CIMR, which is the Center for the Improvement of Mentored Experience and Research at the University of Wisconsin. And they have a great set of resources and materials, some of which this information is based upon. So I also encourage you to seek out that resources in addition to others you may have access to. They work on the science and practice of mentorship. They provide a whole bunch of educational, professional development, case studies, and then also other supportive resources. So, what are some really key things that make up a good mentoring relationship, or some of the factors of behavior of the mentor that contribute to that? The number one has got to be communication. Um, it's just an ongoing life lesson for me, and I'm sure for you, that communication, even when we think that we said what we've intended, that's not always the case that it's come across the way that we had hoped at the first try. So effective communication is definitely number one on the list. Alignment of expectations. We often have assumptions about what should get done and how it should get done. But if we don't align those expectations, we often end up with disappointment on both sides. Assessing understanding, which means checking on perhaps the first two items, that the expectations were clearly understood and that we've effectively communicated them, and that there are ways that we check that we're being understood. Inclusion. Um, how do we actually create the environment in which the student feels able to express what they are thinking about, express themselves and communicate for themselves, and we create an environment which that happens successfully. And then we deal with and understand students that have behavior and performance that is different than our own and from different backgrounds, informed by different cultures, informed by a variety of differences, which we may not at first appreciate. And then also independence, because ultimately we are trying to create students who have the tools to know what is the expected behavior, what are the standards that they need to meet, and that they can find different ways to achieve that independently. So this is all extremely important because if we can use mentorship as an effective tool, it really increases the productivity and self-efficacy of our mentees, and it helps our students to persist. So it's really one of the very first foundational elements of a student having the opportunity to have successful outcomes on their career path in STEM. It's an interesting thing also that mentoring sometimes is learned and not taught. That there are classes that one can take, but it's always a constant journey and it's constant learning of lessons that are not always formal lessons. And so, although this is somewhat formal and it's also somewhat informal, again, I hope that these are just suggestions that give you pause to think about and do your own self-assessments to see where there might be opportunities to engage new strategies, or just reinforce ones that you may have done intuitively that seem to have been successful. So there are a variety of ways that you, as a mentor, can actually support your student, and you have different roles, right? There are times when you're a guide and you're providing the how and why behind how something works or why a process is carried out the way that it does. As a challenger, we don't want to hand our mentees everything finished. We want them to do something, even if it's difficult, and then give them the confidence and tools to persist in solving a challenge. And then other ways, we may also be a role model. There are things that we don't do, maybe even consciously, but our mentees may be looking at us and taking in that we may have achieved a role that they see themselves wanting to be in, and they're looking at our behavior and they're understanding our approach through their own, even often unconscious process. And that role model, even though it's not something we might purposely craft, is a role that we often have and we want to use in the right way. So, what makes a good mentor? Some other elements of it that are, I guess, derivative of the points mentioned earlier. Empathy, really understanding where our students are coming from, requires actually getting to your student and trying to see what they're willing to share about their background. That helps you to understand where they may be coming from. Active listening, organization, building a relationship, a rapport. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're always best friends with our mentees, but that we do have rapport. Uh, Observation, creativity, leadership, constructive feedback. Managing conflicts is always a good one. I always tell people in any complex thing, there's almost certainly going to be conflict. And so we don't necessarily need to be afraid, but we do need to acknowledge when a conflict arises that we have positive ways to deal with that. Um, how we manage ourselves and sometimes overcome our own habits in order to allow the mentoring relationship to flourish and our own communication styles. So how do we get more specific with some of those? Um, when it comes to communication, really listening is number one, but then also making sure that we provide timely feedback. Oftentimes, mentors are quite busy, and so having a regular weekly check-in, not just on the scientific and research objective, but actually on the mentor relationship itself, so that you can provide timely and constructive feedback, right? It's 8 weeks is not a lot of time, and we may make observations and have desires to correct things that we don't express until 2 or 3 weeks in, and then we lose some of the time there that could have made things better. Alignment expectations. I'll be very clear about what we expect, right? It's not the friend relationship. It's very much, you are the mentee and also the investigator. And so making sure that it's explicit what you want, but then also allowing the trainees to express themselves and making that a safe space. Um, Assessing our understanding, making sure that the mentees understand or that we understand what they understand and what they know, and that we give them the tools to correct areas where they may need more understanding, more research, more self-study. Thinking about our own biases, those are going to be definitely important. And then how do we make opportunities for the mentee to grow and become more independent? So those are really, really important ones. So how can you do this? What are some suggested ways? Well, to the extent that you feel comfortable, um, you can always think about sharing appropriate personal experiences from the times when you were being mentored, especially when you encounter failure, which we expect to do when we're doing research, but also when we're encountering success. Um, Trying to find and acknowledge the strengths of the mentee and the accomplishments that they bring to the table. That's a confidence boost that can help the mentee get settled. Um, Always remembering that the mentees do come with existing knowledge, and we want to incorporate that new knowledge that we're bringing, encouraging questions. And in fact, it's a difference between saying, do you have any questions? And, well, what questions do you have? Encouraging them actively to state that we expect questions and that we want them to ask questions to probe their understanding. Um, we also can create opportunities for mentees to give us feedback, and for us to do the same. Obviously, there is a power differential, an experience differential, but we do want to get feedback from our mentees on what they feel we can do that helps them to have a positive relationship. And then there can also be appropriate ways to engage outside the specific research lab setting, and oftentimes that's having lunch and getting to know the mentee in that way, in an appropriate context there. So, in the first week or two of your mentoring relationship, hopefully you have a list of things that you want to do or accomplish before the mentee arrives, and maybe even on the points we just covered, there's a list that you can make of things that you'd like to see doing yourself, thinking about the steps that you want to take in the meeting, thinking about things that they absolutely need to know about your lab and how you expect your lab to function appropriately, others that they may be working in the lab and what your expectations are about who they may be taking instruction from. And just thinking about yourself, what are the most important things that you can do to start the relationship off? And just a moment of reflection on those things are often key for success. So, in the communication realm, that may mean going over a communications plan. What are you going to do at the beginning of the week? And then at the end of each week, how are you going to make sure that there's time to reflect and assess progress? How are you and when you're going to provide feedback in those scenarios, and how will you provide feedback? That feedback can be everything from some of the mentors' work habits. Are they showing up on time? Are they putting in the work that's necessary? Their study and research habits, but also their attentiveness to detail in the research procedure, whether it's working with equipment or collecting and gathering data or keeping a notebook. And then also recognizing that the mentee may not always be comfortable asking for help, even when they need it. So creating opportunities for that to happen. As far as active listening, we're super busy as mentees, but trying to create an environment where we're going to be distraction free, where we have the opportunity to take in exactly what's going on. Now, oftentimes that means eye contact, looking at body language, modeling the behavior that we want from them in terms of paraphrasing, saying what we think that we're hearing, and asking them to do the same, and encouraging questions. As far as progress and adjustments, really figuring out from them, perhaps asking them to express in their own words what they felt they're learning at the moment. Finding opportunities where now they are making progress and can they work more independently, dealing with failures that they should be encountering at some points, and figuring out constructive ways to doing it, and finding the right balance between independence and supervising, thinking about when you need to step in and when you need to allow them to do some troubleshooting. Some of the things that are going to happen is that there are a variety of ways that we communicate. And so for email, which is going to be a must for many, that is often very timed, is very, very appropriate for setting up meetings, clarifying plans and goals, and for questions that are not urgent. It's also very important to think about generationally, even though you may not be that far removed from the age of your mentee, how people use email may be quite different. And so setting expectations for how you're going to do that communication or use that style effectively. But there are also things we don't suggest you use email for. So critical or complex feedback. might not be the best situation for doing that. And when it comes to talking about our impressions of behavior, those may be best done in person. When we're talking about the types of feedback, there's certainly times when we're using that feedback just to motivate and encourage. But there'll also be coaching feedback where we want them to go over something, increasing their skills and their knowledge or trying an ability that they need to hone. And then evaluation, where we've made some expectations clear. We then realize that those expectations are not being met. And then we help them to understand, okay, here's the difference between what I want and what you did. And here are some suggestions that we can work on. And oftentimes we need really all of those types of feedback in order to achieve our goals. And when we are giving feedback, we really want to focus on what's being done well and should be continued and what can be done better, and then where the improvements necessary. So we always want to make it a point of attacking a problem and not the person. Um, and that changes our language, right? So when we look at a student and perhaps we're in a scenario, oh my gosh, it seems like they're not motivated. Um, when we, encounter that situation, being blunt, hey, you look completely unmotivated. Hey, you're slacking off. Um, that may not be as an effective form of feedback as really thinking about, hey, here's what I'm seeing that the work is slowed down. What do we need to discuss to get the work back where it needs to? Because we may be surprised at the answer. It could maybe a lack of understanding. It could be something else that's going on in the home. We don't know oftentimes, and so we have to ask. And opening in that broad way, the conversation is much more effective than just a blunt observation. Somebody comes to you, your notebook is a mess. Yes, in our head, that's what we're seeing. But now we need to talk about, hey, wait a second, I'm noticing that the lab notebook, I'm not making it through. Here's some suggestions that I'd like you to think about. And here's the importance of keeping that notebook and why we're doing it that way. Being late. Yeah, you realize that they need to be on time. It's absolutely essential. But here we can explain what's going on and why it's important to us and what do we need to do together in order to fix that. When we do encounter the need to give feedback, we want to make sure it's prompt because that's the best time to address it when it's fresh in everybody's mind. We do want to keep it positive. We want to make it specific. And then we hopefully want to see a correction in that we can come back to and give positive feedback. Although often when we are giving the feedback, we have to distinguish even how it's given in terms of oftentimes positive feedback is great in public. And then when we have more critical and sometimes a negative that we have to address, that's often a situation for privacy. Um, we also have to think about our own body language, our facial expression. Some people are very emotive, and so controlling our own body expression is really, really important. And there are certain things that we want to avoid doing, like pounding a fist, hopefully, or tapping, or other things that might be aggressive and intimidating. The way that I've always learned to think about it is this behavior impact and follow-up. So this is a great way, a formula for giving feedback. It also allows us to do that earlier, and a piece of advice of attacking the problem, not the person. So when there's something we need to correct, we often start with what was the exact behavior that led us to make an observation? What's the impact of that behavior? We can't give impacts that talk about other people or other situations. We have to be very specific about what happened and who it affected or how did it change things. We need to check if they understood and agree with our assessment, right? If they think they didn't do it a certain way, they're likely not going to change. So we have to reach agreement that the behavior actually occurred, that everybody perceived what was going on. We have to use objective assessment of the impact of that behavior. And then we agree on a plan, summarize, and then what that plan is going to be, and then follow up to make sure that we're seeing a change. And when it comes to doing that, we also are doing this mentoring and this feedback and the communication with the idea of inclusion. So we also want to take into account that students often come from backgrounds that are different from our own. And it's a situation that is always learning because even if a student you think they may have come from a background that's very much like your own, there are almost always differences which inform where the student's coming from, and we need to take time to acknowledge those. So we want to avoid creating situations that exclude our mentee, and we have to figure out culturally or from their background um, where might that happen and how do we minimize that. There may be stereotypes and biases that we come to the table with that we need to understand. And then when it's appropriate and how it's appropriate, we can let them know that, we also have our own challenges. And we almost always have encountered areas where we ourselves have felt excluded or inadequate. And so we can share when it's appropriate that it's a learning experience and that as long as we're also both committed to making the experience positive, and building trust, we can overcome those challenges. Um, we have to acknowledge that we all have these biases, and mentors may come from one background. And in this program, we may often encounter mentees that are coming from a different background. We don't want to ignore the fact that we have different backgrounds. And we don't want to assume that everybody is just going to be treated the same because often it's not. Um, even though that we may be doing our best to make sure that everyone is treated fairly within the lab environment, students often come from a background they are treated differently. And so we don't want to ignore that by being quote unquote colorblind. Instead, what we want to do is acknowledge that we have those differences. And then as a mentor, the mentor may feel uncomfortable because you're afraid of being misunderstood, or you're not sure what to say, or you don't want to be perceived as being prejudiced. So these are all things that are real issues. They can be dealt with. So we want to acknowledge them. And they also may be times when you want to reach out to us as the coordinating center, even for a hint of advice. And we're more than helpful, more than grateful to be able to come to you with anything that we think could be helpful. Some of the things that happens from groups that have been traditionally excluded or underrepresented in STEM fields is that students can feel isolated. They may be one of the few people that they feel come from their background in the lab environment. They may be dealing with presumption where people may think that they're not there because of their own competence, or they maybe feel put in a spotlight because they are different. Um, they may be feeling like they're scrutinized more than others and that they have to work extra hard. And these are things that are evidence-based, borne out in literature that we often have to deal with. And just knowing that your student may be coming from this situation can help you be sensitive to ways to correct it. So I definitely think that the some of the suggestions is to come with the attitude that everybody that is coming as a mentee is really capable of success, no matter where they're coming from or what their academic path is. One great way to start about the conversation and getting to know your mentee is to ask how they got interested in science, um, learning something about their family and other interests they have that make up their complete identity. And these are often points where there's an opportunity to find common ground and to be able to build a relationship that's trust-based. The final element that we'll also think about is assessing yourself on where you lie in the scale of mentoring. There are people who are extremely detailed oriented, some may say micromanaging, and there's some who are extremely independent oriented, sink or swim. And really, the truth is that the best mentoring relationships lie somewhere in the middle, where you are able to proceed. And also for different types or even different moments of the mentoring relationship, one veering to the left or the right on the scale may be more important, right? In handling a new complex procedure, you do want more of a micromanagement style. As a student learns, they do get more independence and you can leave them to their own devices. So identifying where you land and when it's appropriate and how you want to achieve balance is a final thing to think about there. Um, in terms of progressing along the path of independence, you know, you're going to start telling them on a daily basis where they need to be doing, but then really progressing to the point at which you can give them goals and outlines of how to achieve what they're doing. Um, goals where they are also given independence and learning out how to figure out what they need to do in order to achieve it. And then the ultimate goal is to outline the objective and then letting them set their own path. And that's where there may be different opportunities to a greater or lesser extent in a short period of time, but you can also provide that for your mentee. So hopefully those are some tips and tricks that put you on your way. We hope that you reach out to us, your coordinating center, as you have questions, and we'll be staying in contact and really hope that you have a positive experience this summer. We really are super grateful to our mentors because we couldn't do this without you, and we really hope you have a fantastic summer experience. Thanks very much, and then we hope to be in touch.